Welcome to the Explainer. So let's talk about that feeling. You know the one. You're completely exhausted, you've been waiting all day to get into bed, but the second your head hits the pillow, your brain just refuses to switch off. Well, in this Explainer, we're going to break down a surprisingly simple trick that might just be the answer for that racing mind.
I mean, wow, this quote from a Reddit user, it just perfectly captures that feeling, right? That Sunday night dread, but on a Friday. It's that anxiety that just builds and builds and follows you right into bed. It's this feeling that your thoughts are on a runaway train and you just can't find the brakes.
And yeah, that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? Why can't our brains just switch off? What is the deal? You know you need to sleep, your body is screaming for it, but your mind is just stuck in overdrive, replaying conversations, making to-do lists. Turns out, this difficulty shutting down is a super common trait for anyone who struggles with sleep.
Well, it turns out there is this technique that's been going absolutely viral on social media, and it promises to interrupt that exact cycle. It's called cognitive shuffling, and it's designed to do one thing: quiet that racing mind.
Okay, so the idea behind this is actually incredibly simple. It's like this. You actively break your brain's laser focus on whatever's keeping you up by deliberately feeding it a stream of totally random, neutral images and thoughts. It's basically a way to change the channel in your brain, shifting it from that high alert state to a much more relaxed, sleep-ready one. And here's the crazy part. While it feels super new, this whole concept has actually been around since 1989. You might have seen it pop up online called the military sleep hack, which kind of makes sense, right? It references similar techniques used to help soldiers get some rest in really unpredictable and stressful situations.
So, how does this actually work inside your brain? I mean, is it really just a distraction? Well, no. There's a fascinating neurological reason why scrambling your thoughts is so effective. Let's get into the science of it.
All right, so the science behind all this really comes from a Canadian scientist named Dr. Luc P. Baudouin. And his whole goal was to figure out a way to tackle insomnia by getting to the root of how our brain decides it's actually safe enough to fall asleep. Okay, so here's the breakdown. Think of your brain's cortex as its problem-solving department. When you're worrying, that department is working overtime, right? It's highly active. But when you start deliberately thinking of random, unconnected images, you're basically preventing the cortex from latching onto one single stressful train of thought. It's like you're telling your brain's security guard, hey, there's no coherent threat to analyze here. It's all good. And that's the signal it needs to stand down. Your body can finally relax, your cortisol levels can drop, and you can drift off.
But wait, this story doesn't end there. This is where it gets really interesting, because the struggle to sleep might be rooted in something even deeper than just the stress of your day. What if? What if it's actually connected to our fundamental sense of self? Just think about it for a second. Sleep is one of the few absolutely essential things in life that you just can't force. I mean, you can decide you're going to eat, you can decide to go for a run, but you can't decide to fall asleep. You have to let go. You have to surrender. And for our minds, for our ego, that total lack of control can feel, well, deeply threatening. And this really gets to the core of the issue. Research from the National Institutes of Health actually links insomnia to something called thanatophobia, which is basically death anxiety. Now, this fear tends to pop up whenever our sense of control is threatened. And because you literally can't control that exact moment you fall asleep, that moment you lose conscious awareness, your ego can see it as a kind of mini death, a threat, and that triggers this really deep-seated anxiety. So this brings us to this really cool idea of a loud ego versus a quiet ego. Your loud ego, that's the part of you that needs to be in control, that needs to protect itself at all costs. It's the voice in your head that keeps you awake, trying to force sleep to happen. But the quiet ego, that's totally different. It's all about humility and acceptance. It gets that some things, especially sleep, just can't be forced. Its whole thing is practicing letting go.
And check this out. This quote basically says that having a quiet ego can act as a buffer against that death anxiety we were talking about. It's about being willing to accept things as they are, without needing the illusion that you're in control of everything. And here's the paradox. When you finally accept that you have zero control over falling asleep, that's exactly when you create the perfect conditions for it to happen naturally. Wild, right?
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. Because our modern struggle with sleep, it might not just be a personal problem. It can actually be a cultural one. It turns out, the way we think about sleep and dreams today is a huge outlier in human history. Get this.
Something like 90%. 90% of traditional societies around the world actively seek out and place a high value in experiences they have in other states of consciousness. We're talking especially about dreams. So this is the difference between what anthropologists call monophasic and polyphasic cultures. Modern industrial societies like ours were mostly monophasic. We're taught from a young age that waking life is the only thing that's real and that dreams are just, meaningless brain fluff. But most other cultures, historically, have been polyphasic. They don't see dreams as fake. They see them as a different, but equally valid domain of reality. For these polyphasic cultures, the things you learn and experience in your sleep are actually valuable. And that perspective really makes you think, doesn't it? Maybe our modern anxiety about the unproductive hours we spend asleep is a completely self-imposed cultural problem, one that feeds right back into that fear of losing control we talked about. Okay, theory is great, but let's bring all of this back down to earth. Let's talk about something practical you can literally try tonight. Here's your how-to guide for putting cognitive shuffling into practice. So here's a really structured way to do it called word shuffling. First, you pick a totally random neutral word with at least 5 letters. Let's use sleepy. Then for the first letter, S, you just start thinking of other words that start with it. Simple stuff like song, star, sandal. Don't stress about it. When you kind of run out of S words, you just calmly move on to the next letter, L. Light, lemon, lizard. And you just keep going. The goal here isn't to be perfect or to impress anyone. It's literally just to keep your mind gently occupied until you drift off. Now, a few things you should probably know. Does it work for everyone? Honestly, not always. For some people, it can actually feel a little too active. And if that's you, then this isn't the right technique for you. How long does it take? It can totally vary from night to night. And do you get better with practice? Well, anecdotally, yeah, people say they do. It can become this little routine that basically signals to your brain, okay, it's time for sleep now. So as we start to wrap this up, what's the big takeaway here? It's pretty clear that this technique is so much more than just a clever little trick to distract yourself. When you really get down to it, cognitive shuffling isn't just a distraction. It's a practical exercise in letting go. It's a way for you to actively practice what that quiet ego does naturally, letting go of the need for control and just accepting that sleep can't be forced. It'll come when it's ready. You're not getting into a fight with your own mind. You're just gently guiding it somewhere peaceful. And that really leaves us with one last big question to think about. What if the secret to a good night's sleep isn't about finding some new magical trick or hack? What if it's about developing a whole new relationship with our own minds? Shifting from a relationship built on control to one built on acceptance and, just a little bit of gentle guidance.